Being the daughter of a powerful Peruvian guy, Stephanie Ramirez was like a total academic star with a seriously strong personality. She was rich, a business school student, and oh my god, she also loved playing poker. So, one night, while she was at one of these poker games, she met this tall, good-looking foreign guy. But here's the thing, she had no clue that this guy was actually a killer on the run, wanted for a high-profile case in North America. And, yeah. She only realized who he really was when they were alone together. The tragic part? By then, it was already way too late, because now she was stuck in her room with Orang Vandersloot. Today, we're diving into the lesser-known story of Vandersloot, and how Stephanie's life was brutally cut short by this cold, heartless killer who was already suspected of international crimes.
It's about time that people get to see the other side of the story.
Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to Detective Mike's channel. As always, before we dive in, drop a comment with your favourite dish and like. One fun fact about it, I'd really love to read what you share. And hey, while you're at it, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're getting started. Welcome to Peru. This is a country of crazy contrasts and rich history. You can hike the majestic Andes, explore the mysterious Machu Picchu, see the colourful terraces of the Sacred Valley, and just soak in the vibes of ancient indigenous culture. Lima, the capital, is super impressive with its modern architecture and amazing food. Oh my god, the ceviche is next level, and across the country, you'll fall in love with the vibrant markets, traditional festivals, and the super friendly locals. But, don't get it twisted, life in the city hasn't always been peaceful. Corruption is a huge issue, and in Lima, deadly clashes between protesters and police aren't uncommon. I can't claim to know everything about this, but it seems like a constant problem. Just in 2023 alone, there were over 50 reported deaths. Lima is also the city where Stephanie Flores Ramirez was born, grew up, and, tragically, where her life was taken. Stephanie was a star from the moment she was born. Her parents, Ricardo Flores and Maria Elena Ramirez, welcomed her on the 22nd of July 1988. Her family was completely blown away by her incredibly sweet personality. Like many families in Latin America, her last name combined both of her parents' surnames. Stephanie was lucky to have a happy childhood, and from an early age, she showed a serious drive to succeed and a real determination to excel at everything she took on. Born into a well-off family, Stephanie had a wealthy dad, Ricardo Flores, who used to be a race car driver and later became a well-known businessman. He was also involved in politics. Ricardo Flores even ran for vice president of Peru. By 2001, and 5 years later when her dad became president, we're talking about the daughter of an extremely influential man in a country with massive social inequality. Stephanie and her 4 brothers had all the perks of life at the top of society and attended one of the best schools in the country. She was a brilliant student and a role model to many. Stephanie was popular but also down to earth, and a lot of her teachers found her charming and super smart. With tons of friends and a successful family, Stephanie led a happy and relatively carefree life. In 2008, at age 20, she decided to study business administration at Sandes University. By 2010, in her 3rd year, she was looking forward to the future, a bright life ahead, ready to start building her own path. Luckily, she was already gaining experience in her family's business, and clients often praised her politeness, warmth, and genuinely pleasant attitude. But even though she looked all innocent on the outside, Stephanie sure knew how to have fun when she wanted. Thanks to her dad's money and access to the best nightclubs in Peru, she was super familiar with all the high-end clubs and casinos. And it was at one of these casinos, called Atlantic City, on the night of the 30th of May 2010, that Stephanie met a guy named Joran Vandersloot. Around 3 a.m, Stephanie sat down at a poker table next to him and, they immediately noticed each other. Even though they were from different countries, they both spoke English fluently, and they hit it off right away. Stephanie was drawn to his confidence, his easygoing charm, and the way he carried himself casual but totally sure of himself. And Joran, well, he noticed a gorgeous local girl with a charming smile and serious poker skills. They started talking at the table, and when Stephanie asked why he was in Lima, he said he was on vacation, trying to get away from some stressful stuff back home. Of course, at the time, Stephanie had no idea that these so-called stressful events were actually connected to the murder of Natalie Holloway, a crime he had committed earlier. Instead, she was told he was the son of a wealthy lawyer and a judge in training named Paul Vandersloot. Feeling safe, thinking he came from a family just as well off as hers, Stephanie relaxed completely, and they talked late into the night. Stephanie wasn't a hardcore poker player, but it was fun for both of them to share a common hobby. And she wasn't just casually interested, she could calculate her odds and win. Just a few days earlier, on March 25, she'd won $10,000 in a local backgammon tournament. Later that night, they'd had a fair amount of drinks, and what started as innocent conversation turned into flirting. That's when Joran asked Stephanie if she wanted to spend the night with him. She agreed, and they went back to his room 309 at the TAC Hotel in the Flores district of Lima. There are conflicting reports about whether they actually had sex. Joran claimed they did, while other sources say she just went with him so they could continue playing poker online. Like I said, the details are pretty murky, but one thing is certain. Once they were back in his hotel room, Stephanie somehow got access to his laptop. Whether she used it to play poker online or was trying to figure something out deliberately, no one knows. But here's the thing, at some point that morning, she realized the horrifying truth he was connected to Natalie Holloway's disappearance. The terror Stephanie felt in that moment was unimaginable. This guy had lured her into his room, and now she was on his turf with a potentially dangerous killer. Unfortunately, things could only get worse from there. When Joran realized what she was doing on his laptop, he just snapped. Rage completely took over, and a physical fight broke out between them. Unfortunately, he was way taller and heavier than her. He elbowed her in the nose, and her head slammed into the wall, causing her to bleed badly. Then Joran climbed on top of her and started choking her, before throwing her to the floor. Seeing she was still alive, he took off his blood-stained shirt, pressed it over her mouth and nose, and held it there until she died. When the sun rose over the Flores Ramirez residence, Stephanie still hadn't returned home. It turned out, she never made it back that night, and her dad, Ricardo, was freaking out. She'd never stayed out all night before, and over time, he felt this terrible sense of dread. Ricardo knew something had gone horribly wrong. Panicked, he called his son Enrique and told him Stephanie was missing, that she should have been home, and that something awful had probably happened. So Enrique and Ricardo started calling and messaging Stephanie's friends, relatives, and colleagues, but no luck. At that point, they decided to contact the police and file a missing person report. Ricardo knew his daughter had been at a poker game the night before, so Peruvian authorities quickly headed to the Atlantic City casino. After getting the security footage from the previous night and carefully reviewing it, they finally spotted Stephanie with an unknown man. Thanks to these cameras, they could trace her movements around the casino, playing, drinking, and walking around throughout the night, up to the moment she met a tall man and sat down next to him. Fortunately, identifying this man and getting his national ID didn't take long. Naturally, as the last confirmed person to see her alive, Joran Vandersloot quickly became the prime suspect. Investigators saw that the pair left the casino together around 5 a.m, though initially, no one knew where they went afterward. The security footage then captured them entering Joran's hotel in the Miraflores district of Lima. You can actually see Stephanie and Joran together as they go into the room. A few hours later, Joran leaves to grab 2 cups of coffee and some bread. 3 hours after they went into the room together, he comes out again, this time alone. When he left, he told hotel staff that Stephanie was still inside, but shouldn't be disturbed because she was resting. It wasn't until June 2, 3 days after her death, after Joran had left the hotel for good, that staff discovered Stephanie's lifeless body in room 309. It was immediately clear she had been brutally beaten, had a broken cervical spine, and suffered blunt force trauma to the back of her head. Investigators also found a tennis racket in the room, which is sadly believed to have been involved in her death. During a check of the hotel's registration system, investigators found that room 309 had been registered under the name Joran Vandersloot, which, unsurprisingly, matched the person seen on the security footage. When Joran left the hotel, he didn't return the keycard and left the TV on loud, trying to make it seem like someone was still in the room. As mentioned, He also told staff that Stephanie was inside, sleeping, and shouldn't be disturbed. At this point, investigators realized he was almost certainly involved in her death. But where exactly Joran went after fleeing the hotel remained a huge mystery. He was nowhere to be seen. With a 72-hour head start, he could have been anywhere. Authorities released his name and photos, hoping to track him down. Before we go further though, who exactly is Joran van der Sloot? What was he like as a kid? And were there warning signs before he became a killer? Born on the 6th of August 1987, Joran Andrea Petrus Vaart lived a life of comfort and wealth. Thanks to his father's financial support, he had a privileged childhood in the city of Arnhem with his 2 brothers and his mother, Anita, who was an art teacher at a school. In 1990, the family moved from Arnhem to the Caribbean island of Aruba. Shortly after, Joran enrolled in a local international school where he excelled academically. Tall, charming and athletic, Joran played soccer and tennis, often practicing with his father in the evenings. Tennis will pop up again in this horrifying story. The same racket was later found in his hotel room, and it won't be the last time it comes into play. Despite his successes, Anita frequently described her son as a spoiled kid and a habitual liar. His 2 brothers were more well-balanced. As a child, Joran was fiery, stubborn, and arrogant. He often snuck out of the house in the middle of the night to visit casinos on the island. You can already see the pattern. Growing up with everything he could ever want, and no one willing or able to discipline him, he believed the world revolved around him. Joran did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and no one ever questioned his behavior because he excelled in school and sports. Yes, this was the life of Joran van der Sloot, a wealthy foreign kid who was used to always getting what he wanted. As he grew up, his arrogance only got worse, along with his taste for expensive things. On the island of Aruba, in 2005, he met an American girl named Natalie Holloway. After taking her to the beach once the local bars had closed, he tried to seduce her. When she refused, he didn't let her go. He kicked her in the head, knocking her unconscious and unable to resist. Then, in an act of sheer brutality, Joran grabbed a nearby concrete block and struck her head with it. Natalie was killed, and he left her body to be carried away by the ocean current. The case of Natalie's disappearance and the media frenzy that gripped the world was talked about for more than a decade. Joran was the main suspect from the very beginning, but due to a ton of legal complications, they never managed to convict him, despite countless investigations, arrests, and interrogations. So why was Joran in Lima in 2010? Well, it was actually about some extra cash he got from a source you might not expect. A few days before meeting Stephanie, Joran was extorting Natalie Holloway's family, demanding $250,000 in exchange for revealing the location of their daughter's body. After getting only part of the money, he fled to Lima to blow it on gambling. It was there, at the Atlantic City Casino, that he met Stephanie Flores Ramirez, an encounter that tragically led to her murder on the 5th anniversary of Natalie's death. At the time, Joran was still on the run and considered the sole suspect in Stephanie's murder. Interpol issued alerts, and neighbouring countries were warned to keep an eye out for the young Dutchman. Miraculously, he was spotted pretty quickly. Joran was seen crossing the border into Chile at the Chacaluta checkpoint. Even though he tried to escape, everyone knew he was in the country. On June 3, 4 days after Stephanie's murder, he was seen in a taxi in the coastal town of Vena del Mar, heading towards Santiago. Chilean police managed to track him down and arrest him. He still had Stephanie's bloodied belongings with him. At first, Joran denied any involvement in the murder. He concocted this wild story about armed robbers waiting in his hotel room who supposedly killed Stephanie when she refused to stay quiet. Yeah, sounds like something a kid would make up, but with Joran? Not surprising at all. On June 5, after being deported back to Peru, his official interrogation began. After 2 days of realizing there was no way to escape, Joran finally admitted to killing Stephanie in a written statement, giving a detailed account of what happened. According to him, on the day of the murder, he left the hotel to buy coffee and bread. When he came back, he noticed Stephanie using his laptop. There was a message on the desktop linking him to the Natalie Holloway case. He said that when he tried to explain himself, Stephanie suddenly struck him and a conflict broke out between them. She tried to run, but Joran was much bigger and stronger than her. In his written confession, Joran said, "I didn't want to do this. The girl interfered in my private life. She had no right. I went up to her and hit her. She got scared," we argued, "and she tried to run. I grabbed her by the neck and struck her. After the murder, he took her money, drank an espresso mixed with an amphetamine pill, gathered his things, and fled the hotel. Later, toxicology reports showed there were no amphetamines in his system, so yeah, Joran was lying, probably trying to lessen his punishment. Interestingly, in Peru, committing a crime under the influence of drugs can sometimes be considered a mitigating factor in court, and his lawyer likely used that in his defense strategy. On the 11th of June 2010, the judge ordered that Joran van der Sloot be held in custody for armed robbery and first-degree murder. The judge noted that he had acted cruelly and violently, and knowing how wealthy his family was, denied him bail. At Joran's trial, there was no jury, just a panel of 3 judges. A simple majority was enough to convict. He was brought to the courtroom under the watch of an angry crowd. Some people even threw rotten fruit and eggs at him. After that, he was sent to a maximum security prison under 24/7 supervision in a high-security wing. In that notoriously harsh South American prison system, reports said Joran offered to reveal Natalie's body's location in exchange for a transfer to a prison in Aruba, but the authorities ignored his offer. Clearly, Joran wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but travelling to Peru and murdering the daughter of a very powerful man? Yeah, that was definitely one of his worst decisions. In prison, murderers and violent offenders often have even bigger targets on their backs, and in such a corrupt system, it's easy to see why Joran was terrified. He sat behind bars in fear, while his legal team did everything they could to support him. Between 2010 and 2012, his lead lawyer, Maximo Navarro, did everything possible to intimidate the prosecution and drag out the trial. He was even quoted saying, "My strategy is to paralyze the process and make everything as complicated as possible." Honestly, you could jokingly call him Maximo, pain in the ass. At first, he criticized Joran's public defender, who had represented him at the start of the trial. During the interrogation, Joran's lawyer accused the court of abuse of power, conspiracy to commit a crime, and misrepresenting his client. He even attacked the translator who was helping Joran translate from Spanish to Dutch, questioning the translator's qualifications. Navarro also claimed that his client was being held illegally before sentencing, and even though he knew the law allowed detention for questioning up to 18 months, he kept doing everything he could to slow things down. Back in February 2010, Navarro tried to use a violent emotional state defense, claiming Joran didn't fully understand his actions during the attack. If the judge had accepted it, Joran could have faced just 3 to 5 years in prison, with possible parole in as little as 20 months. But thankfully, despite Navarro's desperate attempts, it didn't work. By 2012, Joran and his defense team realized there was no way to dodge punishment for the murder. So, on the 11th of January 2012, Joran van der Sloot pled guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $75,000 to the Flores family. That finally closed the legal chapter on Stephanie's tragic death. But the story doesn't end there. As some of you might know, Joran was recently extradited to the United States for charges related to extorting Natalie Holloway's parents. Facing a potential sentence longer than his lifetime, he agreed to a plea deal. Under oath at that trial, he revealed the full story of what happened to Natalie Holloway. Joran also pled guilty to charges of extortion and electronic fraud, receiving a 20-year sentence to be served after his Peruvian term, in exchange for avoiding any criminal charges in Natalie Holloway's murder. And yes, this is where he finally admitted he actually killed Natalie. So what happens to Joran van der Sloot now? In the near future, he'll remain in Peru to serve out the rest of his 28-year sentence, which ends in June 2038. After that, he'll be transferred to the US to serve his 20-year term for extorting Natalie's family, running from June 2038 to June 2058. What happens in between? Nobody knows yet. Even in the short time he was behind bars, another tragedy struck. His father died of a heart attack while playing tennis. In the end, despite such a long prison term, many people feel Joran van der Sloot got off almost too easy. 2 murders and a long list of other horrific crimes, 48 years in prison seems way too light. His actions were utterly senseless and cruel. Personally, I think this guy deserves a far harsher punishment. But who knows? The next 15 years in a Peruvian prison will tell. Wrapping up this story, it's important to remember the most crucial thing. Stephanie sadly joined Natalie as another bright, kind young woman whose future was full of potential. And just like Natalie, the number of people who loved her really shows what an amazing person she was. It's such a huge tragedy that she was taken so early, and even though they came from completely different corners of the world, their fates tragically collided at the hands of one cold-blooded killer. And what's even worse is that this wasn't because the authorities didn't care. They did everything they could to hold him accountable earlier, but there was never enough evidence to keep him locked up for long. Many people suspected he was also responsible for Natalie's death, and the fact that the case dragged on for years, only for him to leave the country and commit another murder, is just heartbreaking. As always, I'm really curious what you guys think about this case. Joran van der Sloot got only 48 years for 2 murders, and he wasn't even held accountable for Natalie's death. Do you think 48 years is enough? And would you have agreed to a plea deal like his? Also, drop a comment if you want me to cover the story of Natalie, the girl he killed first. Well friends, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you really soon in a new video. Until then, remember, take care of yourself, look out for each other, and, of course, stay safe. Detective Mike here, thanks, and goodbye for now.